On the 9th of August 1941, a Spitfire goes down over occupied France. The pilot is trying to bail out. His hatch is open, the slipstream is tearing at him, and one of his legs is trapped, caught in the cockpit as the aircraft spins earthward. He pulls. The harness tears through. He falls clear of the aircraft at low altitude, barely high enough for his parachute to open. Below him is the Third Reich. He lands in a field near Saint-Omer, tangled in his silk canopy, with a broken prosthetic leg and no way to run. His name is Douglas Bader. He is 31 years old, and he is not, in any practical sense, supposed to be here. He lost both his legs in a crash 10 years ago. He was invalid out of the Royal Air Force. He had been told by doctors, by bureaucrats, and by most of the people who knew him that his flying career was over. He never accepted that. Douglas Robert Stewart Bader was born on the 21st of February, 1910. He grew up partly in India, where his father worked in the colonial civil service, and partly in England. His father died of wounds received in the First World War when Douglas was 11. His mother remarried. He was an energetic, difficult, frequently brilliant child, a natural athlete, good at cricket and rugby and any physical challenge you put in front of him. When he was 17, he won a scholarship to the RAF College at Cranwell, the most prestigious officer training academy in the British Air Service. He graduated in 1930 with exceptional marks and an exceptional reputation for flying, and for a personality that found it very difficult to accept limits. His superiors admired his skill and found his temperament exhausting in roughly equal measure. He was posted to 23 Squadron, flying Bristol Bulldogs, biplanes with open cockpits that operated at the absolute edge of what could be done with an aircraft of that era. He was very good. He was also, by multiple accounts, inclined to show off. On the 14th of December, 1931, at Woodley Aerodrome near Reading, Bader was persuaded by friends to perform a low-level aerobatic display. It was not approved. It was not briefed. The aircraft he was flying was not designed for the maneuver he attempted. He went in low, very low, wingtip nearly touching the ground in a roll. The left wing struck the earth. The aircraft cartwheeled and came apart. When the wreckage stopped moving, Bader was inside it, alive but badly injured. His right leg was crushed. His left leg partly severed. By the time the medical team reached him, he was losing blood at a rate they could barely manage. At Reading Hospital, the surgeons amputated the right leg above the knee and the left leg below the knee. He was 21 years old. He was conscious in and out through parts of it. He survived on stubbornness as much as anything else. The prognosis was not good. The surgeons told him he would probably not walk again unaided. No prosthetics existed at that time that were advanced enough to permit normal physical function. Bader decided, apparently, to simply reject this information. Within weeks, he was dragging himself out of bed and attempting to stand on his stumps. Within months, fitted with experimental prosthetics, he was walking. Not gracefully, not easily, but walking. He learned to dance. He took up golf. He drove his car. He went back to the RAF and asked to fly. They gave him a desk job. He flew anyway, officially whenever he could arrange it, unofficially whenever he could get to a cockpit. He passed his physical tests. He demonstrated to anyone who would watch that he could handle a modern aircraft as well as anyone in the service. The RAF invalidated him out in 1933, citing a regulation about physical fitness. He accepted it because he had no choice. He went to work for the Asiatic Petroleum Company. September 3rd, 1939. Britain declared war on Germany. Bader applied immediately for reinstatement. The RAF, facing an urgent shortage of experienced pilots, accepted him. He was posted first as a flying instructor, which he found maddening. He lobbied continuously for a combat role. By early 1940, he had been assigned to 19 Squadron, flying Spitfires. By June, he was commanding 242 Squadron, a unit of mainly Canadian pilots who had been badly battered in the fall of France and whose morale was, by various accounts, in ruins. Bader had a gift for leadership that surprised even people who already knew about his flying ability. He was direct, occasionally profane, entirely without self-pity, and completely unwilling to discuss the possibility that any task in front of him was too difficult. The Canadians responded to that. By August, the Battle of Britain had begun. The Germans sent waves of bombers, protected by fighters, against British airfields and radar stations and eventually London. The RAF flew against them in squadrons of 12 to 20 aircraft, scrambling at short notice, climbing to intercept. Bader argued loudly and continuously for what he called the Big Wing, a strategy of assembling 60 or more fighters from multiple squadrons before engaging the enemy, overwhelming their escorts by sheer numbers. The idea was controversial. It took too long to assemble a big wing, said other commanders. Airfields could be destroyed in the time it took to form up. The argument was never fully resolved. The Battle of Britain ended before it could be properly tested. But Bader's wing, when it flew, demonstrated an aggressive coherence that his commanders respected. He ended the Battle of Britain with 22 confirmed aerial victories. In 1941, the RAF shifted to offensive operations, flying over occupied France, attacking German airfields, provoking the Luftwaffe to come up and fight. Bader led his wing across the Channel again and again. On the 9th of August, over Saint-Omer, something went wrong. Exactly what remains disputed. Bader always believed he was hit by a German aircraft, possibly by friendly fire from one of his own wing in the confusion of a turning fight, possibly by the tail section of a German Messerschmitt he had just shot down. The wreckage of his Spitfire was never fully recovered. What is certain is that he ended up in a French field, with one prosthetic leg broken off in the cockpit of the wreckage, being collected by a German patrol. The Germans who captured him were polite. This was partly because German fighter pilots, whatever their politics, tended to respect the enemy pilots they had been fighting. Bader was taken to Saint-Omer and met by the wing commander of Jagdgeschwader 26, Adolf Galland, Germany's most celebrated fighter ace. Galland invited him into the mess. They drank together. Galland offered to let him sit in the cockpit of his Messerschmitt 109. Bader climbed in, examined the controls, and was apparently too much of a professional to pretend he was not impressed by the aircraft. The Germans offered, as a gesture of respect, and possibly a gesture of propaganda, to allow a British aircraft to fly over France and drop a replacement prosthetic leg for Bader. The RAF agreed. They sent a Bristol Blenheim, which parachuted the new leg into Saint-Omer. They also used the same aircraft to drop 2 intelligence agents. Bader got his leg. Britain got its spies. He was sent to a succession of prisoner-of-war camps, and he behaved at each of them exactly as the Germans feared he would. He escaped or attempted to escape repeatedly. He coordinated with other officers. He organized. He made himself a constant administrative headache for his captors, who found that a man with no legs could still be extraordinarily difficult to contain. Eventually, in 1942, he was sent to Colditz Castle in Saxony, the Germans' high-security prison for the most persistently troublesome officers in the Allied POW system. He was still trying to escape when the war ended and he was liberated in April 1945. After the war, Bader rejoined the RAF briefly, helped organize the 1945 London Victory Flypast, and was appointed to lead the Fighter Command Formation, 329 aircraft. He retired from the RAF in 1946. He took up a post with Shell, the oil company, traveling extensively, flying himself wherever the regulations permitted. He became an advocate for people with disabilities at a time when the culture was not inclined to think of disabled people as full participants in the world. He worked quietly and persistently toward changing that. In 1976, he was knighted. The book about his life, Reach for the Sky by Paul Brickhill, published in 1954, became an immediate bestseller. The film adaptation in 1956, with Kenneth More in the lead role, was one of the most watched British films of that decade. It was not a film about flying, really. It was a film about refusal, about the particular human capacity to refuse the version of yourself that circumstance has decided on, and to insist on a different one. Bader died in September 1982 of a heart attack after attending a dinner for Field Marshal Montgomery. He was 72 years old. His prosthetic legs are preserved at the RAF Museum in Hendon. The particular leg that was left behind in his Spitfire cockpit over Saint-Omer on the 9th of August 1941, that one is lost. The Germans kept it, or it was destroyed, or it found its way into a private collection somewhere in France. Somewhere in the fields near Saint-Omer, in the summer of 1941, a man fell from a spinning aircraft into enemy territory. He had no legs to run with. He spent the rest of the war trying to escape anyway. If this story moved you, subscribe to follow the Untold Front. New stories every week.